Good evening to everyone who clicked on this video. My name is Bailey, a 24-year-old living in an estate and married to a billionaire in New York State. And yes, there is a reason why I had to mention living in an estate, and that I'm married, which I'll be telling you in this video. Before I continue, make sure to subscribe and like this video for more content. So picture this. You woke up in a hospital and the first person that greeted you is someone you don't know or remember. The only thing you do remember is your name and who you are. That is exactly what I went through when I woke up to see a handsome man gasp before hugging me tightly. "Darling, oh thank goodness," he said hoarsely. Tears swelled in his eyes as he brought me in for another hug as I tried to fight through the haziness in my eyes to what was going on. He kissed me on the cheek with a giant smile. "You came back to me." I racked my brain trying to remember who this man was. When I drew to a blank line, I decided to pull him away and tilted my head to the side. Who are you?" His eyes widened momentarily and then he chuckled. "Come on, darling, don't be trying to play your games with me again. You know how much I didn't like it." When I didn't say anything but stare as if he's crazy, he blinked. "Are you serious, Bailey?" "Bailey, so that was my name." I swallowed, feeling a bit overwhelmed. "I have no idea who you are or who I am." He called the doctor, and they did some tests on me. As it turned out, I was in a terrible car crash a few weeks ago. I had lost a good portion of my memories from the past 3 or 4 years. I found out the man that hugged me soon after I woke up is a billionaire. The doctor discharged me a few days later and requested that I went back home with my husband, Ty, to see if it'll jog my memory sooner or later if I went back to my normal life. I was still nervous. In his Rolls-Royce car that is 6 digits, I couldn't help but ask where my parents were. He gave me a reassuring smile. "I called your parents, but they've been so busy at the farm with the season's crops that they couldn't make it. But they will be calling you to check," he told me. "You remember your parents at least?" At that, I nodded. "I think I remember up to a certain point. Since I don't know you, I guess we can see from there." "We met when you were 20, he informed me. "How?" He went quiet for a moment and then chuckled. "You were working at a coffee shop when I came in. I was starstruck by you and decided to ask for your number. The rest was history." "So that's like 4 years of us together is just gone?" I said, offering an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry." He shook his head, squeezing my hand. "Don't worry about that, darling. The car accident was not your fault. The drunk guy was killed on impact. I'm just happy to have you back in one piece." "So what about my job? Do I need to call them?" At that, Ty threw his head back and laughed. I was shocked and taken aback by what he was laughing in the first place. It was a genuine question. After brushing away his tears, he shook his head. "Darling, you're always the funny one, but no, you don't need to call them because you don't work." I felt my mouth open in shock. "I don't?" That didn't seem like me at all. I grew up on the farm and since I was working my whole life, I fell in love with it. I hated sitting around and doing nothing. The thought of just sitting around while I could move just gave me hives. I wasn't the lazy type at all. Nothing gave me greater joy than getting up and earning my own money rather than having it given to me. So did something change in the 4 years that rendered me from working? Ty shook his head at my question. "No, shortly after dating me, I persuaded you to leave your job. I mean, why would you need to if you're married to me?" Before I could ask more questions, the car pulled into a huge estate. I gasped out loud as I came out of the car. It was a mansion. There was a huge pool in the front along with 4 shiny cars. I turned to Ty, shocked by what was happening. I guess I had a hard time believing Ty was rich until I saw it in person. "This is all yours?" "All ours," he corrected. He parked his car and led me inside. I swore my jaws almost hit the ground by how expensive everything looked. I grew up on the farm and liked how cozy my parents' place is. This was the exact opposite. "Who is this Bailey?" He gave me a grand tour of the place as I stared around, stiff as a board. Everything didn't make sense. There were pictures of us all over the house, but there was something about the way I smiled that seemed fake. It seemed to be forced. Was I not happy? Seeing how big the mansion was, I decided to ask the question that's been bugging me. "Where are the kids?" He furrowed his eyebrows at my question and then cocked his head to the side. "Kids? We don't have kids?" I asked. I thought it was the reason why I wasn't working. It would be the only plausible answer to my pressing question. I wouldn't quit just because of a man. But I would quit if we had kids, and no one was able to babysit for them. He shook my head and I couldn't help but feel the disappointment washing over me. "No, we both agreed we never want." I couldn't help but feel a pang of dissatisfaction. I wasn't sure about the old Bailey, but I wanted kids. I always did since I was a child myself, so what changed? Not to mention, I have small stretch marks across my stomach. So I assumed we had kids. I guess I was just born with it? "Oh," I managed. "So no job and no kids." He gave me a reassuring smile and kissed my temples. "Don't be sad. We have a cat, though." "A cat? Whose idea was this?" I have to point out to you guys that I hate cats. I didn't like their eyes and sneaky behavior at all. Mine, and you agreed, he answered. Oh, okay. I sighed, shaking my head even though we couldn't see it. We continued to talk the whole day as he filled me in on the years I forgot. Every single time he told me stories, he would laugh while I would question the old me. Nothing he said I agreed with, but I can tell that he does genuinely love me as well. By the time dinner came around, my stomach growled. He checked the time and turned to me. I didn't realize how late it has gotten. What would you like to eat? My mouth watered as I grinned at him. I knew this was my favorite food and there's no way that anyone can change it, not even my husband. Pizza! A frown settled across his face for the 100th time today, and I felt like I failed another test. He groaned, rubbing his temples. Pizza? Really? Honestly, darling, I thought you would be over this by now. Remember we agreed no more pizza because it's very unhealthy and it's a lot of carbs? I didn't remember, but I hated how I seemed to be disappointing him again, so I swallowed and nodded. Oh, right. You know it's because I love you that I'm keeping you on a diet and everything else, right? He said. Yes, I know. I nodded, but I didn't know who I was fooling. Then I'll get a salad instead. At that, a satisfied smile crossed his face finally. A Caesar salad for you, darling. Every single day, I felt more and more like a stranger and actor in my own home. Ty treats me like a princess, but I always feel like a trophy wife. Everything that I like or love to do was stripped of me. I couldn't help but wonder, was I happy with this man? He treats me well and he's a billionaire, yet why does this feel so suffocated to be around? One day, there was a knock on my door. I got up from the sofa. Ty had gone to work, leaving me alone like usual. It was rather lonely and boring, but I couldn't complain too much. After all, I didn't want to upset him even more and be given another lecture that I didn't need. It was always darling this and darling that. I was so sick of hearing that nickname. I opened the door and came face to face with a young man. He was about the same age as me. We stared at one another for a moment before I cleared my throat and forced a smile. Hi, may I help you? Hey, Bales, he said, his voice low and deep. Bales. Something about that nickname felt good, familiar even. I snapped out of my thoughts and retained a smile. Sorry, have we met before? So you don't remember me? I shook my head. I'm not sure if you heard, but... You got into a car accident and suffer amnesia. I know. I know everything about you, Bales. Something about him caught my attention. My heart fluttered the more I stared at him, and I needed to know who he was. I'm sorry, who are you? It's me, Cody. Cody Speckler. I waited for my brain to tell me who he was, but just like everything else, I had no idea who he was to me. I gave him an apologetic smile. I'm sorry, I have no idea who you are. I'm your secret lover. Well, before I met you, I was just known as the guy who cuts your lawn every other day, he said like it was a joke between us. There was something about his crooked smile that seemed to be cute and familiar, but I pushed it away. He had to be lying. I would never cheat on my husband. You're lying, I said, deadpanned. He shook his head, scoffing. No, I wish. You were going to leave Ty a week before you got into that car accident. I figured you were faking it because you changed your mind, so that's why I came here, to make sure that you're not faking it. Leave Ty? My husband? I asked with a deep frown. Nothing he said made sense at all. I tilted my head to the side, curious. Why would I do that? Because he doesn't treat you right. He said like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I couldn't help but laugh at how crazy that all sounded. It was the first time since I left the hospital that I laughed. Maybe it was because of how crazy it sounded, or maybe it was because it felt right when it came to him. He was looking at me with a smile as well as I shook my head after calming down. How does a sweet billionaire not know how to treat me right? Because he doesn't get you. You said it yourself, Bailey. He didn't get you. Not like I do. Plus, he trailed off, his eyes darting off. I pressed my lips thinly together. Plus what? Before I can answer, something small grabbed onto my legs. I looked down to see a pair of eyes that reminded me of myself peering back up at me. She looked like a mix between me and this new guy, Cody. She laughed, smiling so brightly that I almost went blind. Mommy! Plus, Cody said with his eyes piercing mine, we have a daughter together. I bet you weren't expecting that, were you? I'm so sorry to end the story like this. I really didn't mean to. I just had to know what others think about my hectic life. I'll be sure to do a follow-up in the future. But for now, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like and a comment. What do you think would happen in part 2? Do you think I went with this new guy, Cody? Or stayed with my husband who doesn't get me, but at least he can give me financial stability?